Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. Um, it's it's definitely an interesting time with the Stanley Cup playoffs, with the Stanley Cup final just starting, and Dallas taking Game One, which is something I thought they would do. I don't think Tampa Bay can play against Dallas. Dallas is a very gritty team. They find a way to score goals. Their goaltending has been really good. Um, you know, Vasilevsky's gonna have to steal at least two games for the banged up Tampa Bay Lightning. I think it would be totally different if Braden Point and Stamkos were healthy, but they're not. So it's a tough break for Tampa. Um, let's go. Let's get into some Maple Leaf talk. There's a whirlwind of activity on social media regarding the Toronto Maple Leafs and what's going to happen in free agency with a lot of intriguing names heading towards free agency. There's a lot of goalies, Braden Holtby, you know, Kudobin. What's going to happen with him? Can the Stars re-sign him without giving him a significant increase, based on what he's done in the playoffs so far? Considering they're paying Ben Bishop roughly $5 million. That's going to be an intriguing situation. I think a guy like him is a perfect platoon goalie if you're going to go with that kind of system and trade your number one. I don't see. There's definitely a lot of options on there, and I don't see a real significant option for the Leafs if they move on from Freddie Anderson. At best, you're going to get someone on par in terms of talent level. So, can they save some money there, allocate some money to defense? That's going to be an intriguing situation. I don't know how much money they can save on goaltending. A guy like Kudobin or Hopi or Leonard, these guys are not going to come cheap in free agency, so it's going to be interesting. Other than that, right now, Alex Pietroangelo is really dominating all of the storylines. It's incredible to see what's happening in St. Louis right now. I was listening to a podcast from a radio show in St. Louis, and they were comparing this situation to what happened with Chris Pronger and Brett Hull when they left St. Louis. Brett Hull basically just left because they wouldn't give him a no trade clause. Money wasn't a problem at all, and with Chris Pronger, there was a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of money, but you know, people didn't get paid an exorbitant amount back in those days, so you know they're fighting over hundreds of thousands, $400,000-$500,000 difference in pay. So it's really interesting to see a guy like Pietrangelo want to test free agency to see what he can get. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a pay increase he can get in a flat cap, especially not only just because of the flat cap, but because cash flow is super tight. You see it. I work in the IT industry, and I work downtown in a lot of banks and big companies. They're scaling a lot of things back, not because the profits aren't there. A lot of corporations, including mine, in the first quarter alone, they made $150 million. People are making money, but the cash flow is tight because of the 6 to 8 months that they've had to spend on, paying things like rent and things like that all over. And these things are drying up money, and cash flow is tight for a lot of corporations. So you're going to see it in the NHL this year as well. no fans, very very limited T-shirts, jerseys, things like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of what kind of a payday comes to a lot of these guys. Joe Thornton is a free agent. There's a lot of intriguing names out there. A lot of them being linked to the Leafs, and usually, history shows that Leafs get usually thrown into the conversation when people are looking to drum up interest in their players, and they want an increase in money, or they want some sort of a bidding war to happen. So Leaf fans are very good at taking a name and running with it. Wayne Simmons is a perfect example right now. Leaf fans talking about Wayne Simmons a lot lately, and they're a little bummed out that a guy like Kyle Clifford is going to hit free agency. At least initially, if the Leafs end up opening up cap space, he could be an option still. He's not a very expensive player. He's probably looking for something around the 1.5 to 1.75 million range. But Pietroangelo, right now, I was reading an article on NHL.com. Pietroangelo will become a free agent. Could stay with Blues still. Definitely, there's a lot of time for them to still work on this. The NHL draft is just over 2 weeks from now, so it's coming down to crunch time. Free agency is going to open up right after that. And I'm surprised as to how much Pietroangelo is willing to talk to guys like Pierre LeBrun, Darren Dreger. He's definitely voicing his disappointment in what's going on, and you can see from the quotes right here. The first quote he comes out there that is quoted is, I guess the best way to sum it up is, we haven't really made much progress. And that is the talk right now. Everyone is saying that there's zero progress. The St. Louis Blues have actually told him to go and hit free agency and see how that goes for him. It's interesting that a lot of talk, guys like Carlo Koliakovo on TSN 1050 radio, who's apparently good friends with Pietroangelo, was at his house in Toronto when he had the Stanley Cup party. He's saying a lot of things on Twitter, like, if you're nice to me, or if you do this, or many likes or retweets, this many retweets or likes, or whatever he's looking for. He says he's willing to talk to Pietroangelo and, convince him to come to Toronto. And he's hinted at a lot of stuff like that. I don't know if he knows one way or another. I don't know if he's talked to Pietroangelo. I don't know if he has any information regarding the player, how willing he is to talk with a team like Toronto and maybe negotiate when free agency hits. There's no doubt, if he hits free agency, that the Leafs will call and will at least ask to see what's possible, which, opens up a huge can of worms. We saw with a guy like Tavares when he hit free agency. San Jose, both Bob McKenzie and Darren Dreger reported that San Jose offered $13 million AAV to John Tavares, which he turned down. And the New York Islanders offered more than the $11 million that Toronto offered to Tavares, but he took less money based on what was offered to him to come to Toronto and try to win here, which, apparently to him it's something important, it's something special. So Um, if the reports are true, and St. Louis did their offered their initial 7 million times 7 years, I believe it was, to Pietroangelo, and then they upped it to 7.7. And apparently that was a non-starter because he's coming in and around 9 million and as high as 9.25 million. So if that's his number, realistically, what kind of a discount could the Leafs see? Could the Leafs see a discount where it's 8 million? Um, which, like I said, opens up a huge can of worms because then it comes down to how do you open up that $8 million? And Jeremy Rutherford, who covers the St. Louis Blues, has tweeted many times regarding the situation with Pietroangelo, about how he's going to test free agency. So it's not just a rumor. It looks like it's pretty official that from now to free agency right after the NHL draft on October 9th and 10th, I believe, is the NHL 2020 draft. It seems like these guys are not doing any more talking anymore. We just think right now that maybe it's best for both sides to see what's going on in free agency, what the team can explore, what I can explore, and if there are better fits for each side. Now, I find this really puzzling that St. Louis would trade for a guy like Justin Falk and then sign him to this long-term contract, but their captain, who's arguably their best defenseman, who's coming off a Stanley Cup. They haven't talked to him. They didn't know till now that his number was this high. I don't know how that's even possible as a GM. How do you not know what your captain wants? Like what he's willing to sign for? It's really baffling how they haven't talked to him at all. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what his mindset is. As soon as the last year kicks in on July 1st, you're able to talk to your players. Why wouldn't you get in touch with them right away? Give us an idea. How many years are you looking for? You're 30 years old. Are you looking for the full 7, for the full 8? What's the money looking like roughly? I mean, you don't know any of that information, and then you go and trade for another defenseman, and you sign him to a huge extension right away. It seems really weird what's going on in St. Louis. They have a lot of good defensemen. They have just Colton Parayko, which is another guy that Toronto people keep bringing up, but I think if the St. Louis Blues were really smart, they go out there, they talk to a bunch of teams, they would see who has interest and who Pietrangelo has interest in. And if it's the Leafs, do a sign and trade. At least get a first round pick, a first round pick and a prospect. Do something. You can't let your captain and arguably your best defenseman walk for nothing. I don't know who does business like this, but St. Louis is they look like they're determined to screw up a good thing over there, and they got a great team. They got a good young goalie, in Binnington. They got a great defense. They got a lot of forwards up front. It's crazy. And this quote right here: "You spend your whole career somewhere to go through this. The reality kind of hits that there's a chance you're going to be wearing a different jersey one day." See, this quote is very important because when you heard John Tavares talking about, when he was thinking about different offers, it was always New York, New York, New York, New York. But the instant, and he said it himself, you can go look it up. The moment he let himself think about another situation like Toronto, he got excited and he couldn't not stop thinking about it. So when a guy like this comes out with a quote and says, the reality kind of hits you that there's a chance you're going to be wearing a different jersey. And now he starts thinking about the different jersey and the city. And, it's, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but I have really, really close friends that are related to Alex Pietroangelo. And he's always here. He's always hanging out. He's got a big family, great people. His party was epic. I definitely wasn't invited, but based on the information I got, it was a hell of a good time. Once a guy stops thinking about his current team and the jersey that he wears, and starts thinking about another situation, it's easy to get excited. And I don't know how St. Louis is gonna. Honest to God, if St. Louis pulls this out of the bag, it's because they overpaid. I don't see Pietroangelo staying in St. Louis, to be honest with you. So here comes the big question. If you're going to add upwards of 8 million, anywhere between 8 to 9 million dollars long term, the Leafs can only offer him 7 years max. So if he's looking for anywhere around $9 million, which is, I believe, what Roman Yossi in Nashville signed for. If he's looking for that kind of money, and there's a discount to be had for the Leafs, the AAV is going to be somewhere between $8 to $9 million. $8 million would be amazing. So now it comes down to, who do you move? How do you open up this kind of money? And unfortunately, when you go on social media, you start seeing a lot of conversation around William Nylander. He's a polarizing player on this team for whatever reason. I don't know why. But moving his $6.9 million cap hit is not going to allow you to sign Pietrangelo or trade for an Aaron. Like, you can't trade him for an Aaron Ekblad because he makes $7.5 million, and you still have to sign Mikheyev. There's Dermott. There's Jason Spezza, Freddie the Goat. Even if you don't want those guys, if you're going to go into free agency, if you want to sign a Wayne Simmons or maybe bring Kyle Clifford back, or you just want to go add depth on forward and defense, you want to go look at a guy like Radko Gudas. There's a lot of players out there, and you need to open up cap space. The Leafs have roughly $7 million in cap space. So to say you're going to add a significant contract on defense, you need... Morgan Riley has 2 years left on his deal. You need to find him a partner that's right-handed. Whether it's, you go out and you can make the biggest trade you want and try to get an Aaron Ekblad. You want to go trade for a Matt Dumba. You want to sign Pietrangelo. No matter what you want to do, you have to open up significant cap space. And significant cap space isn't $6.9 million. So unfortunately, if you want to open up significant cap space, The only name that makes sense is Mitch Marner. Almost $11 million. Think about it like this. If you trade Marner for Ekblad straight up, not only did the Leafs get a 24-year-old franchise right-handed D-man, but they open up almost $4 million in cap space. That's how bad Nylander and Marner's contract is. You get a franchise 24-year-old just about to hit his prime D-man who's signed for the foreseeable future. Like, he's signed for at least 5 or 6 more years at 7.5. And if you traded you open up cap space and you get almost $4 million in cap space. So imagine the Leafs have almost $7 million right now. You trade Marner for Ekblad, let's just say, for example. Just as never going to happen, obviously. But if you did that, you would acquire a $7.5 million contract, and you would add almost $4 million to the $7 million you have now, which makes the Leafs cap space $11 million with Ekblad on board. And then with that $11 million, you can still go out and get Pietroangelo for $8 million and still have $3 million left over and probably give $2 million to Mikheyev. That's how significantly bad Marner's contract is. But if you were to move it out, it would open up 1 million doors for the Leafs. But a William Nylander trade doesn't do that. You would have to trade Johnsson, Kerfoot, William Nylander, and that would give you, I think, let me do the math. So 6.9 plus 3.4 plus 3.5. That's $13.8 million. Now you can keep Kerfoot or Johnsson, whichever one you like. I really don't think the Leafs are going to find a trade partner for Anderson, but if you moved out his 5 with Nylander's 6.9, that's 11.9. That's pretty much $1 million difference. 10.893 for Marner and 11.9 for both Nylander and Anderson. Like, you would have to punch multiple holes into your roster to open up that kind of cap space. I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm just saying, in retrospect, to be honest, there's only one way to add significant money, and that's to move out significant money. And unfortunately, this is not a conversation about who's good or who's better. I'm not talking about skill or goal scoring or anything like that. I'm specifically saying, if you're going to open up significant cap space, $6.9 million is not enough. Like, if you trade Nylander and Johnsson, it still doesn't equal Marner's cap hit. It's close, but Marner still makes more than both of those guys combined. It's a tough situation. Even if you traded Nylander and Kerfoot, you still wouldn't get 10.893. So it's a significant contract. Kudos to Dubas, who was able to get all these guys signed and under a flat cap. I mean, there's a lot of guys who said that Dubas couldn't get all these guys signed. And not only has he gotten them all signed, and even though Marner is a little bit of an overpayment, but he has $7 million under a flat cap, and all of his great players are signed. So kudos to Kyle Dubas, who has done the impossible, who has done things that nobody said he could do. And he's done it. Kudos for him. But, the Leafs, this season that just passed had an almost $11 million third line. Kapanen, Johnson, and Kerfoot were an $11 million third line, and that's a luxury, honestly, that the Leafs can't afford anymore. Whether you trade the entire third line and replace them with Ingval, Mikheyev, Barabanov, Korshkov, there's a lot of talent there on the Leafs that can fill out the bottom six, and it's not a downgrade by any stretch. I mean, Kapanen has had tons of opportunities to step up and be a significant player on the Leafs, and he hasn't done that. So to say, guys like Mikheyev, Barabanov, Korshkov, Nick Robertson, these are all entry level. These guys are all making entry level money, and they can score 10, 15, 20 goals in an NHL season. I think Nick Robertson for sure is going to score minimum 20 goals next year. If they play the full 82 games, it's it'll be interesting to see what the NHL does with the schedule next year if they start December 1st. But I think Nick Robertson is a legitimate goal scorer. We saw in the playoffs in the preliminary round. He put a lot of good shots on net. He picked his spots. And the one goal that he scored, he powered it through the goalie. He hit it so hard that even the goalie, tried to cover up the 5 hole. It still squeaked through. So he's definitely got an NHL caliber shot, and he's going to score goals. I think a guy like Korshkov, big power forward, right winger, can do a lot of damage on a fourth line with maybe an Ingval, maybe Jason Spezza. I don't know. The Leafs have been rumored to be interested in Joe Thornton. Maybe that's a fourth line. But realistically, I don't know how the Leafs can talk to guys like Joe Thornton or Jason Spezza and want to add those guys to the roster where the fourth line needs to be a gritty, tough fourth line that can cycle, that can check, and Joe Thornton and Jason Spezza really are those types of players. It doesn't make sense to have those guys on the roster. Jason Spezza played good in the preliminary round this year, but I don't know. If you want to have a decent fourth line with grit and toughness and all that stuff, realistically, Joe Thornton and Jason Spezza aren't those guys. Even a guy like Frederic Gauthier, who has no offense to his game, he will at least forecheck, hit, and check. Checking is not so much in Jason Spezza's game. He's a high risk play maker, and he will try to dangle in the neutral zone and at the blue line, and most often he will turn over the puck, and the Leafs aren't that great defensively to be able to withstand that kind of mistake. So I think you're better off with guys like Gauthier, Korshkov, big guys like that, and I think they can score eventually. So yeah, Pietroangelo is definitely intriguing. It's a tough situation. You love the guy's character and the way he plays. He's a great defenseman, but you're gonna have to move out a significant contract, and considering a move like that requires you to. And I was thinking about this yesterday. Whether you sign Pietrangelo and then end up trading a significant contract, let's say for example, just for now, Mitch Marner. If you have to move out a contract like that to add Pietrangelo, wouldn't it be more beneficial to the Leafs to go and try to make a trade for example, just as an example, a guy like Ekblad, who's 6 years younger than Pietroangelo. He signed for at least 5 more years at $7.5 million. To acquire a guy like that and to trade away a significant contract, I mean, you're gonna have to do it anyways with the Pietroangelo signing. Wouldn't it be beneficial to go out and get a younger guy who's just entering his prime? I understand, people say he's got concussion history and things like that, but so does Sidney Crosby. I mean, you have to bank on good players being good players, and I don't know. It's a toss up. You can add Pietrangelo in free agency, roughly 8 million to 9 million, whatever the cap hit is going to be, and then move out a significant contract, or you make a trade for a guy like Ekblad, who's 24, entering his prime, making 7.5 for at least the next 5 years. It's a. I've thought about it all yesterday. I even put it out on Twitter. I don't know. You guys let me know. What do you guys think is the better move? Would it be better to trade for a guy who's younger, entering his prime, or would you rather the Leafs signed a guy like Pietrangelo and try to make a trade afterwards? Because the Leafs have 7 million in cap space. Drop in a guy like Marinson's on the roster right now, Inkball's on the roster right now. You drop those two guys into the minors, technically will get you there almost. And you're allowed to go over the cap a little bit in the offseason. So signing Pietrangelo, let's say the number is 8.5. We'll just pick a halfway number between 8 and 9. If it's $8.5 million, the Leafs can technically still sign that contract and then work on trades afterwards. They're allowed to go over the cap in the offseason by a little bit. So it's a real conversation starter. I think the debate on that could go on forever. It's hard to choose one path over the other. Once you sign a guy like Pietrangelo, the moment you call a team and say, would you be interested in Mitch Marner or William Nylander? They know that you're negotiating from you're the weaker side. Instantly the negotiators are like, well, we'll give you, this and this. The return is not going to be that great because they know you have to clear cap space. So you're negotiating from a point of weakness at that point. It's two and a half, almost 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks to the draft, maybe 3 weeks to free agency. It'll be interesting. I think anything that the Leafs do from now to that point will for sure tip their hand as to what they're thinking. If Pietrangelo is going to hit free agency and the Leafs are interested, for sure they're going to make a move or at least move out a contract. We all know Andreas Johnsson is gone for sure. So that's 3.4 million added to the 7 that they have now. So it'll be roughly just over $10 million in cap space. If they move Johnsson, which will it's more than enough for the Leafs to go out and sign a guy like Pietrangelo and still look to free agency to add depth to the roster. But the Leafs have 3 entry-level contracts that can play significant roles on the back end if by some miracle the Leafs were able to sign a guy like Pietrangelo. That would solidify their top 4. You'd have Riley, Pietrangelo, Muzzin, Hall, and then you have 3 spots. You need 7 defensemen, and you have 3 entry-level contracts the Leafs can use at that point. They have Rasmus Sandin, Timothy Liljegren, and they have the Swedish player they signed, Mikko Lehtonen. at 925,000. So I believe I've done this calculation already. Let's take a look at this. So you have Muzzin, Hall, Riley, Timothy Liljegren, Sandin. We'll put Rosen down into the minors. We'll put Marinson down into the minors. Anderson and Campbell are there. We're going to go to free agency. We're going to say St. Louis. We're going to sign Alex Pietroangelo. Let's pick a halfway number. 8.5 for 7. It's going to be 37 when this contract ends. And let's add Mikko Lehtonen, which apparently can play the right side, so it's interesting to see what he's going to be able to. So at this point, the Leafs are over the cap by 1.8. If we were to take Andreas Johnsson off this roster, the Leafs would have 1.5 million in cap space. Hyman, Nylander is the top line. Tavares, Kerfoot, okay. Let's go sign our own guys. Who do we need? Nope, they're all RFAs. I honestly think the Leafs are going to find some way to bridge Mikheyev. And the bridge is going to be 2 million or less, I think, just because he's had very limited amount of games. He hasn't necessarily, he's proved he can play in the NHL, but to what extent, it's not sure. I mean, we'll see what he looks like. I think 2 years at 2 million would be the bridge. They could give him the Connor Brown deal. I'm not sure. Nicholas Robertson. Freddie the Goat. One year, $750. So let's fill out this roster. We'll just do it real quick. So we got Barabanov, we got Korshkov. I believe Frederick Gauthier can play left, and just for fun, we'll say Toronto believes. We'll add a Jason Spezza for $750. 1 year. So we're at 22 guys and we're 3.8 million over the cap. So imagine if you traded a guy like Mitch Marner. The Leafs would have 2 roster spots to fill and $7 million to do it with. I think that's a significant amount of money in the cap world. If it was William Nylander that you're taking off the roster, you would have 2 spots to fill with only $3 million to do it with. I think that's a very hard thing to do, unless the Leafs were to do William Nylander and Kerfoot, and make Engvall the 3rd guy, Jason Spezza the 4th guy. Maybe it's even Frederick Gauthier, and then you have $6 million to fill out the bottom. It's. I think it's easier to trade one guy than it is to make multiple transactions for guys like Kerfoot, Nylander. It's definitely easier just to trade one guy, make one deal for whatever you want to get in return. You could get NHL roster. You could get roster players in return to fill out your bottom 6 with picks and prospects, or you can get a significant player making less money and add him to your roster for a guy like Mitch Marner. But significant money, significant contracts, you can see how much more sense it makes to move out a guy like Mitch Marner than it does to have to move out a guy like William Nylander, Kerfoot, and Janssen. These are too many deals, too little time. And especially if you can get something significant in return for Mitch Marner, like an Ekblad or, whatever it is that you're looking for, I think it makes more sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you end up making multiple deals for Kerfoot, Nylander, I mean, maybe that's why the Leafs are looking into a guy like Joe Thornton. Maybe he becomes your third line center. I don't know. It's a tough sell. You'll have to sell to your fan base that your team got better after these moves. That they're not just a make it to the playoffs team. They are a win around in the playoff team. And if you're subtracting multiple assets like Kapanen, Janssen, Kerfoot, and Nylander, how did you get better? I don't think adding Joe Thornton and bringing back Spezza is a significant increase in terms of talent and making this team better. I don't think you can justify that to the fan base. You can't say, we lost a 30 goal 22-year-old making $6.9 million and a $3.5 million third line center, which we used to replace Nazem Kadri, which is a huge loss for the Leafs. You can't just give away Kerfoot and say, we got nothing for Kadri, because it definitely looks like we got nothing for Kadri, because Tyson Barrie turned out to be an unmitigated disaster. I don't know how Dubas can you can't justify it to the fan base, especially if you're moving out Janssen and Kerfoot, and then you trade a guy like Frederik Andersen and move his $5 million to spend on defense. If you trade Frederik Andersen and you bring in a guy to platoon, and that platoon doesn't get you to the playoffs, if you miss the playoffs the following season, there is no way Kyle Dubas comes back. Brendan Shanahan's last bullet in the gun is to fire the GM before he's fired. If this team continues to fail and these moves aren't good enough, I think the biggest mistake Kyle Dubas has made, because most of this team was he inherited. I mean, he didn't sign the Zach Hyman contract. He didn't, he didn't draft Matthews. He didn't draft Nylander. He didn't draft. He added Tavares, and then he made the Kadri trade. This is not his team per se yet. I think after this offseason, if you end up making multiple significant moves, then it becomes his team and it's not Lou's team anymore. And that is the make or break for Kyle Dubas. Especially if he ends up trading Frederik Andersen for a guy who cannot save the Leafs when they are defensively shaky. And if the platoon doesn't get you into the playoffs, that's bye-bye Dubas. That's Shanahan's last bullet in the gun. He's going to fire the GM. He's going to hire a new GM. And if that GM doesn't instantly get you back into the playoffs the next season, then we're back at square one. We're back to where the Leafs were 5 years ago. Shanahan's going to be gone. A new guy's going to come in. He's going to be like, oh, this isn't my GM. The GM's only been here for 1 year. He hasn't really had a chance to do anything, but the new head of hockey operations, the VP, whatever you want to call him, this isn't his GM, so he's going to want his guy, which means a new GM is going to come in, and that 1 year, whatever direction they chose is going to be a new direction, and we're going to be back into the Burke known as John Ferguson Jr. disaster. Brendan Shanahan was our one shot at stability and a direction. It's this next season. I mean, what the Leafs end up doing in the next month and a half, it's gonna have a long-term ripple effect, and the ripple effect is gonna last years. It's not gonna be pretty in Toronto. My personal opinions are, you can't trade Freddie. You have to hold on to him. He arrived on a rookie team with Matthews in his rookie year, Marner in his rookie year, Nylander was a rookie, and he solidified this team to the point where they made the playoffs sooner than they were supposed to make the playoffs. And that accelerated all expectations of this team. And I think that's the problem. Just because you make the playoffs doesn't make you a contender. But the media in this town just talks nonsense. Cup windows open, cup windows open. What are you talking about? It's nonsense, the stuff they spit in this town. Oh, the window's closed. I can't stand the media in this town. And the fans buy it hook, line, and sinker. The cup window is not even close in Toronto. This is not a Stanley Cup caliber team. These are not cup contenders. Cody Ceci, Tyson Barrie, Martin Marincin is not the defense core that's going to make you legitimate. And unfortunately in Toronto, it's, you have Matthews, you have Marner, and you have Nylander, and the cup window's open. It's ridiculous. The cup window never opened. It's not their time yet. In this town, we're quick to blow things up. Personally, I don't think they should trade Nylander. My views are, this team is good. They need to fill out the bottom six with guys that are more playoff compatible than just regular season guys like Kapanen and Kerfoot. They need to keep the top six in that Hyman. They're adding decent talent. They found Gem and Ilya Mikheyev. They got Nick Robertson coming. It's gonna make the bottom six even better. They do need to add to defense. I necessarily wouldn't blow my brains out on a Pietroangelo or an Ekblad or something like that. I would try to go more like Matt Dumba, $6 million and down range. There's a lot of good D-men out there that don't make a lot of money. Tampa Bay Lightning this year, got Bogosian on league minimum. They got, cheap guys like Luke Shen. They're playing 7 defensemen on most nights, and that's a formula that seems to work. You don't need high press D-men. You just need guys that are defensive minded. You can't fill your defensive core with Riley and Jake Gardner and Tyson Barrie and all these offensive-minded guys that don't play defense and expect them to be great defensively. It's not going to happen. They don't think that way. You got to go out and get, the Dustin Bufflins and the Radko Gudises and the Luke Shens and the Anton Strowmans and the Bogosians. You need to go get cheap defensemen, and there's lots out there that they think defense. They think about blocking shots and doing whatever it takes to stop the puck from going in the net, that are not, flashy names. You don't necessarily need a Pietroangelo or an Ekblad or a Matt Dumba. You just need to go out there and sign guys that are willing to play defense. Stop thinking puck possession and offensive minded. It doesn't translate on defense. You have Morgan Riley, you have Jake Muzzin, you have Justin Hull, who does a decent job at moving the puck and see what's out there. Uh, the list of D-men, if we look at the players in free agency and we just concentrate on defense, there's a lot. There's tons of guys out there in the 3 million range and down who just who don't have flashy numbers because we don't really need too much offense from these guys, but we need these guys to play defense. The Leafs were a better defensive team with Ron Hainsey than they were without him. Now he went in, Ottawa gave him $3.5 million, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of guys out there that play defense that don't make a lot of money. And that's what the Leafs need. You don't necessarily need to blow your brains out on defense to have to go trade a significant piece of your core. I like Mitch Marner and William Nylander just fine. I would really like Mitch Marner to score more goals than 16 for $11 million, but it is what it is. You got him, you signed him, you keep him. I personally don't think Kyle Dubas, as long as he's GM of the Leafs, will ride with his core, and his core is Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander, and Riley. I don't think Anderson is part of the core. He's not part of the leadership group. But he's a good goalie and you need to hold on to him. But you do need to fill out the bottom six and add depth on defense. And defense is cheap. Kevin Shattenkirk makes 1.75. Mackenzie Weegar, Andre Sekera. There's tons of guys out there that make very little money that are just defensive defensemen. Maybe Sandin and Liljegren are those guys, but it doesn't bode well in the playoffs when the Leafs are in a dire situation and they play Martin Marincin over Sandin and Liljegren. Maybe Liljegren wasn't available, he wasn't fit to play, whatever the situation was. But Sandin was, and Marincin is a left-handed defenseman, and so is Sandin. So is Calle Rosen. I don't know. If you're not going to play Sandin or Liljegren, you need to turn them into assets. Assets that contribute to your team. If next season none of these guys play, you got to move them real quick while they have any value. It'll be interesting. We got not that much time left before the NHL draft, and there will be significant moves, not to mention that there is an expansion draft coming up, and teams like Minnesota, who have 3 defensemen. Well, the rules of the expansion draft are if you have a no move clause or a no trade clause, you have to automatically get protected. And so Minnesota has 3 defensemen that have no move or no trade clauses, so they have to get protected. And Dumba is the odd man out. He doesn't have either one of those. So do you protect 4 defensemen and 4 forwards? Or do you move Dumba before you lose him for free? That's the only reason why Dumba's name is in the trade rumors. Because there's an NHL expansion draft coming up. And it's going to affect a lot of teams in terms of what they do and who they move. Interesting times. It turns out that the flat cap benefits the Leafs. There's also a couple of contracts out there, like Zetterberg's contract in Detroit and Hosa's contract in Arizona that they could acquire to go into LTIR. I personally think they will try to do at least one or both of those contracts. The Leafs, the cap is just a number to the Leafs. I think they spent close to almost $100 million this year in an $81.5 million cap. So the Leafs will do whatever it takes. we'll see. I will be back next week with a update. A draft primer of who I think the Leafs will try to take with that first round pick. I don't think they're going to move it. The prospect they got from Pittsburgh in the Kasperi Kapanen trade is their sixth best prospect, according to Craig Button, which is interesting. It shows that Pittsburgh's second or third best prospect is our sixth, which means our system is a little bit deeper and has more talent. And if the Leafs can add another top 10 prospect with that first round pick, that Kapanen trade is going to look pretty sweet. Whether it's that right-handed defenseman Schneider everyone's talking about, or a goalie like Askarov drops, it's going to be interesting, that draft. Hopefully there's some moves leading up to it. It'll give us some excitement and something to talk about. It'll be interesting. Either way, I will be back next week. Tune in. Thank you for tuning in. Like or comment what you think the Leafs can do in terms of trades and the contracts they can move out. It'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting conversation, no doubt. Thank you. Have a good day.